Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have just had another X-class flare from the sun, this time a 4.0 X-class flare, and this is the fourth X-class flare that we've had in a few days, all from this same sunspot group. So a 1.7, a 1.2, a 5.1 X-class flare, all three of those launching coronal mass ejections towards Earth. They hit us. That G4 to G5 minus geomagnetic storm has wrapped up now. There are aurora sightings even down to Mexico and Spain. That was quite intense. Now we have this new 4.0 X-class flare, and that only has a very small Earth-directed component with its shock front. It looks like the bulk of the plasma will be going off ahead of Earth's orbit. And now what's interesting about all this, and really the bigger story for this entire time period, is about how all the solar activity for the past month has basically perfectly lined up with weird objects and comets in our solar system. So 3I Atlas, comet A6 Lemon, and T1 Atlas in particular are the three that right now are close to the sun. 3I Atlas did perihelion on the 29th of October. A6 Lemon did perihelion on the 7th of November, 7th and 8th of November. And then T1 Atlas has its perihelion coming up, I think the 3rd of December, but early December. And well, we've seen this wave of solar activity in big solar flares with this window around each alignment of this sunspot group with those comets. And in fact, this sunspot group right here originally developed more than a month ago on the Earth-facing side when A6 Lemon and also T1 Atlas were also close to the sun, but it wasn't really big enough to start pumping out these big flares. Then once it got towards 3I Atlas, October 21st, it started really going active. It was active the entire rotation, lined back up again with A6 Lemon and also T1 Atlas, pumped out a ton of flares. We had that big geomagnetic storm. Now it's rotating back to 3I Atlas. In just a few days, it's going to be aligned with it because 3I Atlas is only about maybe 15, 20 degrees off of this 90-degree angle with the Earth. So this is a 90-degree angle right there on the limb, and 3I Atlas is a slightly angled off of that. So it looks like this sunspot group is already starting to reawaken with activity after it slumbered for a few days after that 5.1 X-class flare. It'll be interesting to see if it continues to stay active going into November 17th, November 18th, and then we have a critical planetary geometry around November 19th and the 20th with the new moon, because we have the sun, we have Mercury, the moon, Earth, and Uranus almost in a perfect alignment, about less than 2 degrees or so off of a line. So that is the inferior conjunction of Mercury when you have sun, Mercury, Earth. It is a micro moon, so it's a new moon that is furthest away in its orbit. And it's also the opposition of Uranus, where you have the sun, Earth, and then Uranus on the other side. Uranus will be very bright as a result. It's like the full moon phase for Uranus. So all of those combining into one critical planetary alignment that has harmonic aspects to Saturn and Neptune, which are nearly conjunct in their great synodic cycle, and also then to Pluto, and there's other arrangements too, to Jupiter and Venus and more. So we have some really intense energies that have been active and will continue to be active. As we see here, we even had this 4.0 X-class flare trigger a R3 radio blackout over much the same location that it has been triggering blackouts. Here we see it there really hitting Eurasia, specifically Africa. Right, remember right now the southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun more than the northern hemisphere, which is why this is more concentrated there. But the interesting thing about these flares is that they have basically all occurred within a 3-hour window in terms of universal time during the day. So the first one was at 7:30 a.m. on the 9th universal time. The 1.2 was at 9:10 a.m. universal time on the 10th of November. Then the 5.2 was at 10:04 a.m. universal time on the 11th. And this new one here was at 8:30 a.m. today, the 14th of November universal time. So there is this regular cadence where it's like when this part of the Earth is facing the sun, effectively that is when we've been having these solar flares. An interesting synchronicity, coincidence, whatever you want to call it, but 4 times in a row now, that has been the case. So a lot of interesting things occurring right now at this moment in time. There's still some ongoing activity in that earthquake swarm in Japan. We'll talk about that. And in general, just look forward as to what we can expect for the rest of November, that critical planetary geometry, and going into December and even beginning of January, because that's when we have the ultra critical planetary geometry where we get a perfect alignment between Jupiter, Earth, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So very rare planetary geometry coming up January 9th of next year, and we'll talk about all that and much more. And we're going to look at the space weather models for that 4.0 X-class flare, but right from the get-go, I want to show you that this was a powerful explosion. We can see that by our proton flux. So when you get this increase immediately in high energy protons, alpha particles, and electrons, these supercharged ions traveling near the speed of light, that tells you that it was a powerful explosion. So this here being on the limb is starting to get to that location where we really have a good connection between the sun and the earth magnetically. We see this bump up there. Now the other three explosions were exactly earth direct. They were quite significant, especially this one right here, because we see the greater than 500 mega electron volt flux bumped up significantly. But this was a strong explosion, and we can see that by looking at our X-ray flux, a 4.0 X-class flare. Here are the other three: 1.7, 1.2, 5.1. So this is one of the strongest solar flares of this solar cycle, and we'll see if it continues to flare. But there's that calm, quiet period I talked about, where effectively the sunspot group broke alignment with T1 Atlas, and now as it's getting closer to entering into alignment with 3i Atlas, it is seeming to bump up in activity again. We have this 4.0. So that window around 3i Atlas for solar activity seems to be quite wide. And that's maybe because 3i Atlas is from a different star system. We don't even know where it's from, maybe a different galaxy. It's certainly possible if you go far enough back in time, that could be the case. So it has a weird resonance, vibration, and frequency to it. And well, this sunspot group is still very alive and active. So we could get a lot more energy to sweep by 3i Atlas. It's still close to the sun, and that could change it even more. Started to grow a tail after its perihelion. Well, we could have more solar storms sweep by it, and who knows how that's going to change that interesting interstellar object. Here we have our chronograph imagery of that 4.0 X-class flare. We see most of it blast off here. That is the bulk of the plasma. That will not hit Earth, but you do notice a partial halo signature. The shock of that 4.0 X-class flare will likely hit the Earth, but it's not going to be that significant. Maybe we get G1, G2 storming from that. Probably more on the G2 side if it is it does have a good magnetic connection to the Earth, but certainly most of that is going off to the side. And in fact, if we look at our stereo head chronograph imagery, this is 30 degrees ahead of Earth in its orbit. We see that even then it's still mostly going off to the side. And so that's a clue that this is really blasting off more to the western limb and not really Earth directed, even though it is on the Earth facing side. And well, that relates to our story here with 3i Atlas, because if we can look at our imagery from the sky live, this is set for today. Here we see the Earth, the sun, there's 3i Atlas, and well, stereo A is about here. We clearly saw in the Earth facing, in the Earth alignment CCOR1 imagery that it was going this way. And then for the stereo A chronograph imagery, we still saw going that way. Well, guess what? That's where 3i Atlas is. And we have our space weather model by NOAA here showing this launch off. So how accurate this is remains to be seen. This is a model, it's not reality, but they do a pretty good job. We see this moving off to the side there. So here is our Earth-Sun alignment, very similar to what we have here, Earth-Sun alignment. And you show that NOAA is showing this going like this. They don't show it extending beyond that 90 degrees. But the stereo A imagery kind of suggests that maybe it is actually going even a little bit further off than this model is showing there. But they do show stereo A getting a big velocity increase and a big plasma density impact because of that hit right there. So that's not really going to hit us, as we see here, right? This bulk plasma is not going to sweep by according to the model. I think we're only probably going to get a shock impact from that, which will be fast, it'll be brief, it'll be high velocity, but it's probably not going to give us anything more than a G2 storm. So if you are waiting for another round of aurora, that's certainly possible for this solar maximum and the descending phase of solar cycle 25. We have 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of us where we could have enhanced solar activity. Going into 2030 or so, we're going to have these periods of enhanced activity, but they are going to decrease with time. What we had just a few days ago was the third strongest solar storm impact and the third strongest geomagnetic storm of this solar cycle. So that was quite a treat. Here is a composite animation graphic that I've created that shows the connection between solar activity and these comets over the past month. And once you understand this, it really is quite clear and striking. It's also a lot to look at once. So I'm going to leave a link to this for you to download or play with on my Twitter X account. So that is at Stefan Burns Geo, but this will be linked directly in the video description. You can check that out yourself. I recommend you do so. There's a lot happening here, so let me explain it first, okay? We have our coronagraph view, which shows us any sort of solar storms, coronal mass ejections that launch out Earth direct or far side. We have our Earth facing 131 angstrom view, so we can see the Earth facing solar flares. We have our sunspots Earth facing here, and then if we go forward, you'll see it switches to sunspots on the far side. These are the sunspots. And you'll notice here we have this angle vector there. So this arrow, that arrow is always exactly for this sunspot group. So this is the big flare player. It develops into a quite significant sunspot group as we see there. And if we go all the way to the end here, we see that's the same sunspot group. You'll notice that here at the beginning, it's right at 0. And this arrow is facing exactly towards Earth. So I have it set to basically show the angle that it's facing out at all times. You'll notice a few other things. We have these two comets here, T1 Atlas and A6 Lemon above the ecliptic plane and by quite a wide degree. That doesn't show that well on the top-down view, but that shows where they are in the solar system. This is also in the northern hemisphere, more facing up than it is either towards the equator or down. So keep that in mind. And then we have 3i Atlas there out beyond the orbit of Earth, but within the orbit of Mars. And it's slightly above the ecliptic plane, but effectively along the ecliptic plane. And the other thing to notice is that these two comets, while they're close in at the beginning, we don't get really that much solar activity at the beginning because look, our sunspot group was just a baby. It was developing. So it started to get active when it passed by these two comets there, but it wasn't until it started to get close to 3i Atlas that it really started to activate. And one of the big activations was on the 21st of October when there was this 3i Atlas Earth alignment. We got a big solar flare explosion, coronal mass ejection on that date. So I'm going to turn myself off and just watch this because it's really quite fascinating. Here we go. We have our sunspots develop, they're starting to flare. Then on the 21st, we get a big explosion from them as, there you go, you get a whole bunch of activity going through the perihelion on the 29th of October. Then things start to cool down, and it wasn't until they line back up with A6 Lemon that boom, you start to get some big explosions. They cool off, and then they line up again with T1 Atlas, and boom, we get some more, and that is all she wrote. So it is something definitely to play with. It's really kind of hard to scrub through this because it loses a lot of frames. But when we had this alignment here with A6 Lemon and T1 Atlas, these sunspots were just growing. There was some activity as you see, but nothing crazy. These are like M-class flares. They didn't really launch any coronal mass ejections out. It wasn't until the 21st that you get this big explosion from the sun. And let's actually, if we scroll specifically, we'll see that explosion there. I've talked about that a lot on the channel. You should be able to see it right there. Here's a huge explosion. Look at the alignment. It's not perfectly aligned with 3i Atlas, but it is now on the right side of the sun to be kind of interacting with 3i Atlas. And in fact, we saw this sort of activity, these big solar flares, all the way into basically its perihelion. So it seems that there was a very wide window for solar activity around 3i Atlas because it goes all the way through about the perihelion, which was the 29th. That's when this is closest to the sun. Then things died down until about the 3rd of November. And look what happens on the 3rd of November. There's that flare right there. that's either the 2nd or the 3rd of November, it's exactly in a line with A6 Lemon. And then we go forward once more. We get a little bit of a die-off. And then on the 9th is when we have our next big X-class flares. And we see that it's now getting into alignment with the Earth and also T1 Atlas. The other thing too, to go back to the 3rd, is that it wasn't just these comets, it's also Mercury there. In alignment with A6 Lemon. So all these have actually had planets close to them. Here, back on the 21st of October, you had Venus nearby. So you had Venus nearby, that certainly got hit really strongly with these solar flares, but 3i Atlas is effectively behind her. And then on the 3rd of November, you have Mercury and A6 Lemon form in alignment. And then with this big sequence of 3 solar flares that we just had, at 1.7, 1.2, and 5.1 X-class flares, we had the Earth and T1 Atlas. So now we have this continuing again, a new 4.0 X-class flare today when the alignment is a little bit more like this or so, and 3i Atlas is getting closer to that square angle with the Earth, and the Earth is also zooming towards 3i Atlas. So that closest approach of 3i Atlas to Earth, if it does not change its trajectory, which is so far is what has happened, will be December 19th. But we have big activity from the sun, likely more going towards 3i Atlas in the days ahead. And then we have this critical planetary alignment on November 19th and the 20th. Let's check it out. So here is our application solar system scope, which allows us to see the relative positions and geometries of the planets and the sun. They are not to scale, but everything else is accurate. So here we see it set for today. Also, if you want to play with a free version of this, you can go to my webpage, earthevolution.com/energy-analytics. That's linked in the video description. At the bottom of the page, I've embedded this there. So you can play with it directly there, or you can download the app like I have. It's a fantastic purchase if you're into this stuff. So shout out to them. I'm not endorsed by them. We go forward in time here, okay? So we're going to go forward in time. Let me stand over here. And we will see this alignment that occurs on the 20th, 19th, and 20th of November. So here we see the sun, and let's actually go back. See how Mercury is sweeping in? That means it's performing an inferior conjunction. So we have a Mercury Cazimi coming up. Mercury is currently retrograde. We have that going in for its inferior conjunction. You'll notice the moon right here is sweeping into its new moon position. And because we just had the biggest supermoon of the year with the full moon, this will be a micromoon at its furthest away from the Earth. So it will be as close to Mercury as is possible in its orbit, which I find interesting. So we have the sun, Mercury's inferior conjunction, we have the moon as a micromoon, and new moon, we have the Earth, and then we zoom over, we have exactly Uranus opposition at the same time. So 3 celestial events lining up in time perfectly. This is just what it is. That's just simply the geometry of the planets and more. You'll notice here, this also is part of a larger geometric pattern that is active right now. Saturn and Neptune, from a heliocentric standpoint, are nearly exactly conjunct. That is a reset of their synodic cycle, which is like a 37-year cycle. You only get this once every 35, 37 years. Uranus is effectively 60 degrees in relation to them, and then Pluto is 60 degrees in relation to them. So this opposition that we have here, this Uranus, Earth, Moon, Mercury, and Sun alignment, is also part of this larger geometry that's active on the 20th of November. So I expect there to be something energetic to occur then. It's kind of difficult. This planetary geometry and the resonances aren't a surefire. This is exactly what you're going to get every single time, whether it's a big increase in solar activity, or whether it's big geomagnetic storming, or whether it's maybe enhanced earthquake or volcanic activity. It can take on many different expressions, including societally. But that is a very big planetary alignment that we have coming up. And if we go forward, let's go all the way to the beginning of January. Let's check out this really significant planetary alignment. This is one of the biggest that we will have for many years, even decades. So here we see the 22nd of December, and the planets are kind of loosely aligned, though they do have this interesting pattern right there. But let's just zoom forward here, okay? So we're going to go like this. Here we get the 9th of January. Look at that alignment that forms now. All of a sudden, we have a nearly perfect alignment between all these different planets. So Jupiter, the biggest planet in our solar system, lined up with the Earth, which is the biggest planet in the inner solar system, with the strongest magnetic field by far. Jupiter has the strongest magnetic field of all the planets. And then on the other side, combining to be, you know, quite a big energy as well, is Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So we have this alignment occurring there. Pluto skewed off axis, but not exactly in that alignment. And you also notice that Saturn and Neptune are nearly exactly conjunct still, because this is a long-term conjunction that they're going through. So really significant planetary alignment coming up on the 9th of January, more so than the alignment we have coming up on the 19th and 20th November. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but in general, having 3 different CMEs here with Mercury, Venus, and Mars being superior conjunction CMEs, and then having Jupiter at its opposition, its annual opposition at the same time, is very exciting. So that is something to watch. I'll keep you up to date on the channel. Here we can see our latest earthquake activity for the globe the past week, magnitude 2.5 and greater. And the area really to zone in on is Japan, because this is where we've been having this earthquake swarm. So this right here is showing only earthquakes on the map. We see our latest earthquake is a 5.3 at around 2000 Universal Time yesterday, so not that long ago, a little bit less than a day ago. And this earthquake swarm has cooled off a bit, but that 5.3 is showing that it's still active. There's been more than 24 5.0 or greater earthquakes there, tons of magnitude 4s. And if we set this to show largest magnitude, we see it's a 6.8 and a 6.4 and a magnitude 6, all clustered there right in that period of those 3 X-class flares on the 9th, 10th, and the 11th. So very big activity off the coast of Japan. That is still definitely a zone of high earthquake risk going into the rest of November and going, I would say, all the way till the end of November, unless things really cool off. But my forecast for there being something big happening here, being elevated, that it goes all the way till the end of November because of this activity. It is so close to the earthquake swarm and epicenter of that magnitude 9.1 earthquake, March 11th of 2011, that this is concerning. And the foreshock activity is very, very similar. The only thing that's missing is a magnitude 7 plus earthquake, because 2 days before the magnitude 9.1 in 2011, there was a 7.3. That also had tons of solar activity, right? That was Earth facing at that time. So the parallels are uncanny. But as of right now, this has just been a swarm with no real repercussions. But if all of a sudden a megaquake was to go off, or even higher, like 8.5, maybe 9, I don't think a magnitude 9 is likely, but let's say 8.5, that could create a significant tsunami, because you'll notice these earthquakes here are fairly shallow. All of them are fairly shallow. Now, sometimes 10 kilometers is the default value that they use, but you'll notice also like 9.4, you see some that are a little higher up, but in general, there's a lot of activity and it's not that deep. And this is a mega thrust earthquake zone. You get that seafloor to move, you can generate some big waves, and also the shaking itself would be intense, though thankfully Tokyo's down here. So if Tokyo was right there, that would be really crazy. But we hope nothing happens there, but that is the area to watch, especially because we have this alignment coming up November 19th and the 20th that involves the moon being a force that influences earthquake activity. It's not the biggest influence. They show that the lunar phase, especially full moons and new moons, causes about a 0.5 to 1% increase in earthquakes, but they also show that the high magnitude earthquakes do seem to cluster around the new moon or full moon phases. So it is significant in that way. When you have the moon in those alignments with the sun, that's when you get stronger tides. This is ocean tides and earth tides, vertical displacement of the earth, which creates stress and increases fracturing in fault zones. So that's how that works. And then you have a huge geomagnetic storm hit that is going to change the energetic flow around our planet for the next few months. We're going to have a multi-band radiation belt structure going forward for about 2 months. Typically, we have 2 radiation belts. We're soon going to start to form 3 and 4 of them because that was that powerful of a solar storm impact. we don't really fully understand how that affects the more internal geophysical aspects, but we know that there's a connection between the space environment, the atmospheric environment, and the lithospheric environment, the crust, the mantle, and the core. So a lot happening right now at this moment in time that's good to be aware of. And also a new update for you all on the website. We are back in stock with our fruit tea. So if you've been wondering where this is, we've just mixed up a big batch of it. And I'm recommending this right now, not only because it's super awesome and delicious, it's almost like a fruit punch. It's really tasty, but there's no artificial junk or sugar or anything in here. It's just herbs and fruit, but it's really good for your immune system. So as we go into the rest of fall and winter and people are getting sick, they're sneezing, they're coughing, whatever, this is the stuff to drink nightly or just whenever you need to if you want to improve your immunity, because there's elderberries in here, there's rose hips. Rose hips have a ton of vitamin C, and there's also strawberry, which has anthocyanins. That's where a lot of the flavor comes from. You have lemon balm, which helps calm and soothe the nervous system. It's really good if you have anxiety, helps you rest, relax, and sleep. But there's just a little bit of lemon balm, not too much, just enough to kind of take the edge off. And you also have hibiscus for flavor. So those are the 5 ingredients. We just mixed up a new batch, all organic, really incredible stuff. We also are fully stocked up on herb coffee. So it's half coffee, half chicory root, dandelion root, lion's mane mushroom. This is also good to drink when there's a lot of soil activity instead of your regular coffee, to help just give your adrenals a bit of a break, a little bit less cortisol production. And also we do have new crystals in stock. This is a limited run. There's only a few of these left, but these lapis lazuli palm massage stones are awesome. So if you like to get some before they're gone, I recommend you check that out. They're going to go away instantly, basically, because it's not that many, but we are going to buy more. This is just a test run to see if you all like them. So they are about, well, here, you can see how big they are right here with this photo. So they fit right in the palm. Great for just walking around, good energy to them, or also for doing any sort of body work. So all that and much more is available on earthevolution.com/store, including this t-shirt I'm wearing right here, the Cosmos Within t-shirt, sizes small to 4XL, both in white and also in midnight blue. I'm wearing the white color right now. You see the artwork that is on the back, painted by my father, Lee Burns, of the pyramids, also of Venus, the moon, and Jupiter. Really good energy to all this sacred geometry with the Fibonacci spiral right over the solar plexus. So all that is available on the website. I'll keep you up to date with what is happening with the Earth, the Sun, the cosmos, and more. If you subscribe, smash that like button. Thank you so much. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.